Hello ratbags, it's Jade. Welcome to a little ARK video today, taking a look at a brand new interview with Jesse Rapsak, one of the creators of ARK Survival Evolved, with Game Industry Biz. Really exciting news today, talking very far in the future of course, but still talking about the whole of ARK as a game, where it's going to go for the next 2 years, and the options of having a ARK 2. It is spoken about here and it is something the development team have thought about. Now we know this in the past, they have said when they were launching Extinction that they were obviously going to be looking at something in the future, but they didn't want to be too committal, hence why they left it on a cliffhanger. They originally stated they weren't going to be doing any more DLC for a while and it would just maybe be ARK 2, but obviously that changed because of the nature of Extinction. Lots of people basically bought it, and so they realised they could maybe sustain it, having premium DLC every year, keep the money rolling in and keep the content pumping out. And just briefly to add on, as I was editing this video, the Xbox servers have now gone back live. If you don't know, they've been turned off because of all the duping and problems on the Xbox network. Well, they've all been enabled. You can now transfer your creatures, dinosaurs, and supposedly duping is now fixed on Xbox. No more cheating scumbags. No wording yet on what they're going to do with all the duped items, whether or not they're going to do a rollback, a wipe, or just let the servers continue as they are. The community manager stated they're still mulling things over and they will be discussing it and coming up with a solution hopefully soon. Also, there was some good news for Primitive Plus owners. I told you guys the other day that some of the servers got rolled back, but not all of them. Some of you guys did experience your servers not actually being rolled back enough, or you just simply couldn't do it. So people's servers were fixed, but not everyone's. So it's a pretty lengthy interview and I'm going to read a few paragraphs off it. I don't want to take anything out of turn or say something the developers haven't said or misconstrue it. But the very first line is that Studio Wildcard, developer behind ARK, have just announced its 4th and 5th expansion packs, 2 more than they're ever intended to do. Yet the 3rd pack, last year's Extinction, did far better than we were expecting, and the availability of a season pass brought in a lot of new users who suddenly had the entire ARK experience. Wildcard was even surprised by the expansion sell through to the established user base. We never imagined it would be in this state, says Jesse, which is why we're doing more expansion packs, because it's clear the audience is still loving the game, is still playing it and is hungry for more content. It really made us think maybe we should give players more, because there's more story to tell. We left a cliffhanger at the end, we didn't know what we would do with it, we thought maybe there would be a sequel or some kind of spin-off later, but we had an opening to do more story. There was also more gameplay stuff we wanted to do. So earlier this year the team knuckled down on Genesis, the brand new expansion. The article also starts listing off that ARK has sold 16 million copies across PC and console. Now for a long time I've been saying 13 million, and then maybe about last month I realised with the additional sales from Nintendo Switch and basically interest in Valguero, it had gone up probably to around 14 million, but I am surprised as well to see that at 16 million copies. Not to mention 10 million downloads on mobile. By the way, if you do play ARK Mobile or you want to see some gameplay in action, see whether it's worth downloading, go and check out my buddy Cams25. Does great mobile content, has got you covered with all the news you need, gameplay from ARK on mobile. I'll leave the link for his channel in the description box down below if you haven't happened to come across him. Even if you don't have it on mobile, go and give him a sub and check out some of the content just to see what it's like on mobile and how different it is with so many more features. He also obviously does ARK news in general as well. Anyway, the article also states that ARK is one of the most played titles on the Xbox Games Pass, and they've just added that to the PC Pass now as well. So if you have the Games Pass on PC, you get the ARK game and all the DLC so far too. Jesse said this is down to the steady release of expansions, saying ARK has fallen into a sustainable revenue model. We don't sell skins, we don't sell upgrade packs, but ARK is an online game with official servers and lots of costs to keep the game running. It's important for us to always be bringing in new players, and part of that is creating new content for the existing ones so they can bring in their friends. Doing one big update premium one every year so far has provided the game with the yearly revenue model that it needs continued development. If we start making premium expansions, we really wouldn't have any sustainable revenue. If we ever do, I'm not saying we're going to, but if we did, we'd probably have to think about a new revenue model. We've already passed what we thought the life of the game would be, and we're evaluating things as we go to see what the future might be like. Part of it would be dependent on the next year or two as this rolls out, how players react to that content, and we'll make some decisions based on that. Jesse goes on to feel a little bit justifies that ARK remains free of skins and microtransactions, and the success of expansions has validated Wildcard's decision. You know what, he's right. I'll give Wildcard props for that. They did maybe think about it once upon a time when they had survival of the fittest, and that's kind of why they dropped that game mode. They really couldn't work out a way how they could monetize it. They weren't experienced enough with it, and they didn't really want to go down the live service route. We've seen games come and burn, like Anthem, Fallout 76 still recovering, and many other games trying to be constant with content, but also making sure that they're milking their players with lots of microtransactions and battle passes. Despite me being really critical of the way that they update their game and the content they release sometimes not being as good as it could be in terms of bug fixing, for sure I much prefer this model of a good DLC that I'm happy to support the developers every year. Even if that has gone up a little bit, spread over 2 DLCs instead of 3, I still think that's definitely value. No one can really argue that ARK doesn't give you value for money, especially if you're picking it up right now where you can normally get the season pass for cheap as it's in sale pretty much all the time. ARK is definitely one of the most valuable in terms of value added games I have ever played, and lots and lots of community members feel the same way. I see it time and time again how many thousands of hours players have got in it. Jesse says, whenever we do announce new premium content, it's really nice that people get excited. It feels good when people want to pay for what you're creating rather than them feeling like they're getting nickel-dimed and swindled a bit. Which is why I think what happens when you have a lot of loot boxes and tack on those mechanics to something they've already paid for. Jesse says, we've never been a team that gets excited about doing the stuff that's required for that revenue model to work. Things like daily quests, bringing players back every day, trying to plan out events. It's a lot of economics and it's very, you have to be dedicated to it in order for a game just to succeed on that revenue model. That's okay for a game that's entirely free, but if players already pay for the game and you're adding on these sort of free-to-play mechanics, it's kind of annoying, and you're also doubling your work because you have to make sure the base game is great enough that people want to spend money on it, and then you also have to figure out how to entice them to spend further money on the game. I guess that's why the companies like EA, Ubisoft and whoever are willing to tackle that, but there's a lot of issues with that. For indies and medium-sized companies, it's not the thing to try and pursue. Releasing too many expansions can make the game appear somewhat impenetrable to new players, and the interviewer basically cites Paradox as being a good example of that, and how Blizzard have gone back to basics with World of War Classic. But Jesse says it's something that they're pretty immune to. A lot of expansions and story stuff can ironically be fatiguing if it's linear and you feel like you're out of the loop of what's going on. But with ARK, we tried to make our story and our lore an optional thing. You don't have to pay super close attention to it if you don't want to. You don't really have to invest too much in why this stuff is here or what did you do in the last expansion. You can still just hop in with your friends and play at any point in ARK's timeline. I think that helps with the fatigue of too much content where you feel like you have to go through all of it in order to catch up. Jesse also is confident that ARK's track record of popular expansions justifies the release of a second season pass, one that's specifically for Genesis. Wildcard did make it clear that the first pass would cover 3 expansions, and with 2 more on the way, the studio needs the revenue to help support their development. Jesse also argues a new season pass gives a roadmap for what players can expect in the next few years. People know that if they buy the season pass or the ARK experience at all, at this point they're not getting a game that's end of life, he says. It's got at least another 2-year roadmap in it with fresh new content coming. But the interviewer does note that the original vibe was dinosaurs and guns, and now Jesse is basically saying that they're running out of interesting dinosaurs. After going in a sci-fi direction with Aberration and Extinction, they've been gradually adding more and more interesting creatures as we've run out of interesting dinosaurs. There's still a ton of interesting dinosaurs out there, says Jesse, but it starts to get diminishing returns when you add a third type of velociraptor or something. We kind of felt we've almost done everything you can imagine creature-wise, so what are we going to do different in Genesis? One thing we really want to make sure is true is when we make an expansion pack is what we want to give them something they're not going to find in a mod, because we do have an extensive modding community. We wanted to add a bunch of new gameplay mechanics like this AI companion robot that goes around with you, and we've created this open world mission system which is not something ARK has had really before. That's probably the biggest thing I'm excited about is these missions, even if it's something pretty basic. Like collect 50 wyvern milk, kill 100 dodos, something very stat based, but I would still like that. If it's more than that, that would be even more interesting. So the article goes on to talk about the Helena bot that you got for pre-ordering. I know some of you guys are still having problem accessing it, particularly on Windows 10. Jesse says ARK has been an open-ended survival sandbox experience. We still want to maintain that, but we want to layer on top this sort of more directed experience. We feel like that might be the more direction we want to go in the future if we do ARK 2. Wildcard had originally expected to be working on ARK 2 by now, but the success of Extinction and the previous expansions changed its priorities. Since a full sequel would take years to develop, the studio has been restructuring our plans and teams in a way that ensures there's still plenty of fresh content for those millions of ARK players while ARK 2 takes shape. For ARK 2, we need to give players something new that they're not getting from ARK. We're not quite sure what that is yet, we're not ready to talk about it, but we want to be unshackled from what ARK Survival Evolved is and not have to worry about ruining players' long history of dinosaurs and bases they've had for 4 years by making changes. That's just a lot of baggage when you're going to go and make a sequel, and it also frees us up to do a new thing with the IP, go in different directions like you can see with Genesis. And he's got a real good point. Can you imagine if they do an ARK 2, people will start complaining that they can't bring their creatures. No matter how different ARK 2 would be, I still think there would be a lot of people complaining and saying it's just not right. Which is a bit mad, but you know, ARK has got some dedicated fans. So maybe having DLC where you can still add to your collection of creatures by getting the new ones from Genesis, explore new maps, but still return to your home servers. That's probably the best way to go for now, unless till they come up with basically a better idea. And for sure, that better idea is looking more and more likely to appear on the next generation of consoles and won't be appearing on a PS4 or an Xbox One. We'll come to a cool idea for us about what the next step beyond ARK Survival Evolved is, or what's the next step for the survival genre. We don't want to put ARK 2 out there until we can answer those questions and people can see a clear difference between ARK and ARK 2. Maybe a couple years down the road we'll see. And that is pretty much it. So they're not necessarily going to be rolling out with Genesis as soon as it finishes, but they have said they've got teams structured and they are currently still thinking about prepping certain stuff for ARK 2, or at least got the planning stages so that team would be ready. And in that meantime, we've got Genesis to tide us over. It is mad. By that point, I could have been covering ARK for around 7 years. That is crazy. But interesting article, interesting read. We don't often get a chance to hear from developers, not as much as they used to anyway. One thing I am going to say though, beyond the hype and beyond them just explaining how popular their expansion packs are, there is another undercurrent to why they need to do Genesis and why they maybe didn't go straight to just doing ARK 2, and that is Atlas. Atlas is not doing well at the moment. It's currently at one of its lowest points once again, and this time there is no wipe to blame for it. While it still made plenty of money in terms of the first purchases, bearing in mind how many people probably refunded it, and 3,000 players for most games would be actually considered a success, but nevertheless it's still just going lower and lower in the last few months or so. It's almost been a little bit stable between 3,000 and 4,000, but the last week or so it has dropped to the lower 3,000 or so. Now I'm not mentioning this just for the fun of it, but of course we know that Grapeshot consists of half the team from ARK Survival Evolved, or a good number of developers. So Wildcard and Grapeshot are both still working together. They're just a sister company and we presume they're both owned by Snail Games still. But for sure, they still needed to make a lot of money happen to create Atlas and invest in it and get more people working on Atlas and to also replace the people that were to work on ARK. That's why Extinction was so buggy and broken. The developers of Extinction really only had about 5 or 6 months to actually get it done, bearing in mind that most of the team behind Extinction were pretty new to the role as well. This is what I've kind of gained. I could be wrong in some aspects of it, but after covering ARK and doing over 1,200 videos about news and information on this game, I feel like I've got a good grasp of how the studio have worked and how they've changed over them years. So for sure, it cost some money, some capital to get Atlas up and running. It was a strange decision to label it as a different studio. Maybe they came up with some agreement with Snail Games to distance themselves away from them so they wouldn't have to keep changing stuff or doing stuff that they wanted. But that did mean they would have to come up with some capital to actually pay off. And then this links back to Genesis, hence why Wildcard have actually decided to do more DLC. It's not simply just to make the player base happy or because it was popular, which are all good reasons as well, but because they did need the capital, they did need the money to cover the development of Atlas and give themselves a fighting chance at making the next ARK 2. If they're going to take a break from it, no one would really launch a brand new game so soon after the last DLC. We would expect maybe the next ARK 2 to have a couple years break, and I do believe they just didn't have enough money to sustain them till then. And so the obvious option is Let's use our player base where we still have 12-13 million players that have bought the game. Let's keep adding DLC, get the money invested, and that will shore us up and hopefully get us even more capital to work on ARK 2 in the future. So they're just some thoughts. Nothing is ever going to be guaranteed until I can get an interview with Jesse. But like I said, based on what I know from the company, based on following it all the development, that's what I firmly believe. It isn't just down to the popularity, it's had to be a need because they were running out of money. Either way, it doesn't matter. You guys are going to happy just to have the content. My only concern always is how that content comes out. Is it going to be complete? Is it going to be working? Are we going to be spending weeks and weeks complaining about issues? Let me know what you think about ARK 2. Are you quite happy they're doing Genesis DLC instead of going on to the next part of ARK? Would you prefer just a big break from ARK? Give yourself some time to build up and then jump into something new? And do you agree or disagree with me about it appearing on the next generation of consoles? I am Jade. I give you in-depth news and information about the survival games that you guys love. Make sure you like this video if it's been useful, and stay tuned soon for my thoughts on the Genesis DLC overall. Until next time, rat bags, laters.